All right. Well, hey, you guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. I'm Josh Thomas, your host today, and I'm really excited to have John Lovell from Warrior Poet Society here today. We're going to have a fun conversation talking preparedness, family, homestead protection, how those things go together. And I'm just excited to introduce John to you guys, and hope that after this episode, you'll take some time to get to know him and Warrior Poet Society a little bit better. But first, we want to give a shout out and a thanks to our sponsor. This week's episode is sponsored by Layman's. Layman's, many of you know, is a provider of all kinds of different supplies for a simpler life. Used to be a whole lot of off-grid handmade stuff. Now they got you covered on canning. They've got you covered even on emergency supplies. And so want to encourage you guys to go check out Layman's. You can get a link for them. I'm sitting here looking at just all kinds of stuff they have for basic, emergency supplies, preparedness stuff that we'll be talking about today. Not those specifics, but you can get some of those things there, as well as all your canning supplies, grain grinders, all kinds of great stuff. So we're just thankful to be partnered up with them, and that they're helping make this happen. So go check them out. We'll give you the links below. All right. John Lovell. John Lovell is the founder and CEO of the Warrior Poet Society, a values-based community dedicated to physical protection, the pursuit of truth, and living for a higher purpose. His message has garnered over 100 million views across social media. That's including a YouTube channel with over 1.5 million subscribers, a phenomenal video platform online, as well as a store to get all kinds of supplies when it comes to self-defense and family protection. Now, John's a former war veteran and special operations soldier, having served in the 2nd Ranger Battalion. After his military service, he served as a Christian missionary in Central America full-time. Now today, he is that CEO of Warrior Poet Society, a full-time video content creator, public speaker, firearms trainer, and homesteader. John lives on a small farm in Georgia with his wife and 2 sons. And let's welcome John on. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Hey, Josh, thanks so much for having me, man. Good to be here.
Absolutely thrilled to have you. And hey, you're down in Georgia, right? How did the hurricane affect you down there this last round?
So I'm up in the mountains of northern Georgia, and
Yeah.
I thought as a hurricane's coming through, I'm like, hurricane, that's for coastal people. Surely that won't affect me. So I didn't really think anything of it, but we got so much rain, and we had a bit of a drought for 3 weeks before, so the ground was all hardened. And though I live on a hill, higher elevation north of Atlanta, we flooded. And so it was a big, disastrous ordeal to us until I see what happened to those folks in North Carolina and Florida, where they're just flooded out, houses swept away. And as soon as I see that, I want to say, nope, we're good. All is fine here. Yeah. But the morning that I found that I was flooding, I had little flood sensors that were going off. I went downstairs to 1.5 inches of standing water, and I was pumping water out, and I was sweeping water out my back doors in my basement for a couple hours. And it's a finished basement, so it's not like it's just cement and studs down there. We're ripping out drywall, baseboards, all furniture had to go out. My bookshelves got ripped up. I had thousands of books I had to pull upstairs, and it was a pretty big ordeal for us, pretty expensive, both in time and money. But we came out very well compared to many people who literally lost everything, lost their homes. And so I'm not complaining at all. I'm just saying this thing happened, and it really caught me on my heels. I did not expect that a hurricane would have touched me here. So that was surprising.
Yeah, that was the truth for a lot of people. Really, really hard what so many people are going through. I don't know if you track Justin Rhodes at all and what they went through, but similar, they're up in the mountains a little bit up above Asheville, and I've been to their place. You wouldn't think, too much could happen with a bit of rain, and man, it did. And I think it makes us think about preparedness a little bit. So for you, just like you said, you're in the mountains in Georgia, you're a guy that's generally prepared. Usually we go through some questioning when something like that happens to us, right? Like, well, this caught me a little off guard. Didn't expect this. Does that shape anything for you? Does it make you think about preparedness any different, or or challenge you to think about your property differently at all?
Yeah, I mean, risk assessment, threat mitigation, preparation in general, that's what kind of guy I am. But it was a nice reminder that we as prepared folks, preparers and homesteaders, we're always becoming and never arriving. I am preparing and I will never really be prepared. And this was a good case in point. It was a little bit of a humbler. I've had trying to homestead and failing forward and learning all this stuff. You can't go through with too much of a, push back shoulders and too proud, because you get humbled so quickly. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm planting. A worm ate all my squash. I don't know what I'm doing. And so we have so many humbling moments as we've been pushing more and more into self-sufficiency and self-preservation and preparation. But this one blindsided me a bit.
I think there's two good points in there, and one just is that humbleness, right, of approaching life and approaching things. We do what we can, but whenever we get too much like, I got this, you're not touching me, we're probably going to get humbled a little bit. We're probably going to face something that's going to go, oh, okay, all right, I need to stand back a little bit. And I think that's really important. But the other side is that we're getting prepared, but we're never, ever really going to just be totally prepared.
Right.
And there's always going to be something. And that has a big effect, I think, on how we approach life, how we approach family, how we approach it. To me, faith is where this goes a little bit, in knowing and being okay with that there is no total preparedness for anything.
Right. Yep. I agree. That's great.
Yeah, we gotta, I think, talk to me a little bit just about how you think about that and bringing that out, just about things you can't be prepared for, things that are going to overwhelm you. You're a man of faith, and to me, that's where faith is a big key to that, to help us walk through and get prepared for things, but knowing we'll never do it perfectly, but yet we can walk in faith. I see a lot of people today get really worked up and really stressed, and they want to get prepared for a lot of things all at once, maybe.
Yeah, I can't control a great amount of the forces around me. I do have faith in the one that does have control. And though things may not go my way, in the end, they do go his way. And so in the matter of faith, preparation, always preparing, but never quite there, never prepared. It's just like sanctification, always getting better and becoming more like Jesus and always falling short. And so until glory, I'm still this fatally flawed dude, just trying to do a little bit better today than I did yesterday. But preparation of you keep uncovering all kinds of other areas. I'm like, I should lean into that more. I should learn more about that. Oh, I should do something different there. And so always learning, always growing, onward and upward.
Yeah, well, man, preparedness without faith, that's like a walk of fear, right? Because there's always something more we got to do. And when you can walk with that faith that you're talking about, we can keep preparing, we can keep taking steps, we can get challenged and be okay. But yet there's walking with that faith that helps us just carry on.
Well, that's good. I like the impetus for preparation for me. It doesn't spring out of paranoia like it might for some, and it doesn't spring out of a desire to control. It comes out of just, I want to be a good steward. I'd like to be maximally free and to be able to protect, provide, lead, and love my family. And the best way I see that is to not be plugged into the matrix, so to speak. I would like to be able to have some self-sufficiency here. And it's not just that it's a good idea to prepare, because if disaster strikes, well, then you're ready for that. And so a lot of times the preparation, it's not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm prepared, I have even less reason to be fearful of we've been training for this. We've been preparing for this. And so whereas we did get hit, we still had a lot going for us here. I mean, we had plenty of food and everyone's without power around us, and we still got power. And so we still had food. We still had clean water. And so things that have affected people around us in recent memory, we've been fine for because we were prepared. And so I see it as just a better way that I can protect and provide and love and lead my family. And it's also a healthier lifestyle. It gives kids lots of chores and things to do, and that keeps them healthy. And we're kind of all pulling shoulder to shoulder as a good family unit and team, and it brings community in as well. And so I find it a healthier lifestyle that is good stewardship.
I like that. That kind of leads in. Well, that was a lot of the, that next subject, and thinking of stewardship and how preparedness ties into family protection and protecting our families. That's a piece of it, right? But how does that fit into the whole?
Can you kind of clarify what do you mean by family protection?
Well, you're a guy that's talking about protecting people, protecting family, protecting others. You've been out fighting for others in places, and so a lot of what you're sharing, with the world is protecting people, right? That's the angle you're coming at it from a lot of the time. And so, how is preparedness a piece of protecting our families, taking care of our families, and protecting other people even?
So good. I see the role as a protector provider, a dad, a husband, is to be a bit broader and more holistic. Some people immediately, protect your family. Oh, you mean get a gun? I'm like, well,
right.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I also mean of like, hey, be able to control your own inputs, know what's in your food, and be able to have food on hand so that if grocery stores clear out, I've been a good provider, and that's a good security in that. If economic forces all of a sudden upturned and we went into some kind of economic recession, a bad one, or a depression, things that have all happened in the U.S. And guess what? They will happen again at some point. We don't know when, but and I don't live in fear that the sky is about to fall, but I am prepared, and I'm becoming even more prepared in those ways. And so protector, provider of like, that's how I would mitigate that from a financial standpoint, as a just feed your family standpoint, as a have water, have power. You want, your property in an LLC or a trust, and that provides legal protection. You want insurance, and that provides some type of protection. I want life insurance, and that provides some kind of protection. I want a home security system and video cameras. That provides a certain type of protection. I want firearms and training, and that provides a different type of protection. And so when I think about being a protector, provider, or being prepared, I'm thinking about it really broad, and I'd like to, as I think about it broad, go deeper and deeper on different areas as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that holistic approach. That was where I was hoping you would go with that, and just realizing that, like you said, a lot of times we think about family protection and we go to thinking about a gun or a knife or how we're going to protect the family, and that's obviously important, but there's all these other pieces, and being prepared for the world that we're facing today and really the fragility of it. We're dependent on some megalithic systems that are big and efficient for us, but they can fail very easily, as we've seen. And the responsibility I think we have as men that's being prepared is part of protecting our family, right, and being prepared for the times that we face. So let's pivot a little bit. What is a warrior poet?
So a warrior poet is somebody who lives for higher purpose. They're ready to sacrifice in the defense of others. And so that's kind of the one-liner. If I was doing more, I'd say, well, we take the archetypes of a warrior and a poet and all the attributes that would live under those archetypes. So the idea there is to be fully warrior and poet simultaneously. And I think that's the calling of all men. We should be warriors and poets. You shouldn't be a lover or a fighter. You should be both. Because in fact, real love wants to protect. And so one really does feed the other. You want to be able to protect your family. Think about the soldier context. But once you get home from war and doing that warrior thing, it's the poet that really keeps the family involved. The warrior isn't very good at romance, but the poet sure is. The poet's real good at discerning deep purpose and being more sensitive and being more romantic and being emotionally available and seeking out truth like a philosopher and appreciating beauty. It's all the most important stuff. Like if you took our United States Constitution as a bit of a picture of this, the First Amendment is packed full of all the poet stuff, of freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And then the Second Amendment is the warrior stuff. And it's the warrior stuff that allowed our country to exist in the first place. And it's the warrior stuff that protects the First Amendment and all other rights. And that's what the founders saw. That's why they put the primacy of the Second Amendment. They did it, second thing they did, because they recognize you're not going to ever really keep all your other God-given rights unless you also have the right to life, the right to defend that life, and to be able to protect yourself, both from anybody, marauders in a down grid or a tyrannical government. And that's what the Second Amendment is really about. It's the fail-safe of a dying republic. If a government ever goes tyrannical, what you don't want is the government to be the only ones with guns. That would be very, very dangerous. I'll ask people who are more pacifistic and they don't like the idea of guns or violence. And I'm like, hey, I could get behind that of like, I don't like violence. If you could just hit the button and like, no more violence. I'm like, all right, good deal. Way to go. But it's wishful thinking, and hope is not a course of action. And so we live in a real world, not the ideal world. And in the real world, there's dangerous forces around. There just is. And so us as men don't want to be dudes with our heads stuck in the sand. We want to be living in the world that actually is, where bad things can happen sometimes. And we would like to be ready for those. In the same way you want to be prepared in being able to be self-sufficient on a homestead with food for your family, you'd like to be able to defend them from other forces as well, which could be bad guys or fascists, tyrants. And so we hope it doesn't come to that. But real love protects. And so that's the idea. We want the attributes of a warrior and we want the attributes of a poet. So we live both of those 100% each, not 60-40 one way or the other.
So you're kind of painting a picture of a whole man. And I love that picture of not just the macho, the strong, the hard worker, the provider, the protector, but also this guy that can be sensitive, that can be in tune with his family, with his wife, with the world around him,
right?
With ideas and concepts. And so I meant to hit this when we got started. So you just laid out a beautiful philosophy that's summed up in this concept of warrior poet. I'd love to go back a little bit and hear your story, your journey, just a little bit about you. I meant to hit that in the beginning. We got right into some deeper stuff. But how did you get to the idea of a warrior poet?
Sure. How far back do you want to go?
Wherever you want to go, wherever it's relevant for you and your life journey and your story. Maybe it goes back to where you grew up. Let's take 5-10 minutes and let's tell your story. I'd love for people to hear it. Got it.
So the idea of warrior poet, it's something that kind of slowly cooked for me. I don't know, a bit of a troubled teenage years. I had a good childhood and some troubled teenage years. I guess I was striving for belonging and purpose and chasing fun. And I don't know, I guess I was living quite frivolously. I had a remarkable conversion experience when I was 19 years old. That changed everything for me. That changed the trajectory. And that was happening right before I went into the Ranger Battalion in the United States military. While I was on that trajectory, I'm trying to figure out how to be a good warrior, and that path was laid out quite clearly for me. What I did notice is my brothers in arms were very good at war. They didn't seem to be quite as good at marriage or family or life balance and health. It seemed they were good at war, but not as good at life. And I didn't want to fall prey to that. And so I was looking, how does a man really balance himself out? I don't want to be a cartoon of a person, all warrior or all poet. I'm like, no, a man's not supposed to live in those extremes. A man's not supposed to be a woman, and the man's not supposed to be a T-2000 robot without soul, killer from the future kind of thing either. It's like, right. No, where can a real man be balanced out? The heart of God reveals all. God calls himself a protector of the innocent and a warrior, and he commands us to be good protectors as well, as we're made in his image. You notice King David was the Bible's greatest warrior who had killed his tens of thousands, but he was also the Bible's greatest worshiper, writing the majority of the Psalms. It's no accident that this King David, a warrior poet, was called a man after God's own heart, because I think that's what Jesus is. He is the commander of the Lord's army, as we see in Revelation 19. He's the lion and the lamb, as we see in Revelation 5. He was commander of the Lord's army for all eternity past, until he put aside his armor and his sword. The incarnation, he came to be as one of us on a hostage rescue mission. So he came not to judge us and make war, but to die in our place for our sins. So he didn't come to judge us and he didn't come for war, but he is coming back to judge us, and he is coming back for war. We call it Armageddon. which he'll lead. A lot of Christians will recoil of that, and that's because they, to put it plainly, they just don't understand much Bible, and they probably built a caricature of Jesus as well to make him kind of a pacifistic flower child hippie, which is what they would like him to be, but that's not him. He's the lion. He's the one that demons would tremble in terror of and beg him not to torture them before the appointed time.
Yeah, well, we got to take the whole truth, right? Not just a part.
The whole truth. The whole truth.
Yeah, yeah. But going back, so you were going through the military. You were special forces. You're on your journey. You're a man of faith by then, but you're walking alongside soldiers and thinking about these things. Where did it go from there?
Sure. So, I saw myself as a soldier. I also saw myself as a missionary to Ranger Battalion. And I think, the Lord really brought me through walk that line, relatively satisfactory, and that was good. When I finally got out of the military, I worked a job for a while, started a company, and then my wife and I sold everything, rented out some stuff.
Sorry, you're an entrepreneur. What kind of company did you start? So you got out of the military and you started a company for a little while?
Yeah, that's right. And I was really running this fire suppression systems company that dealt with commercial kitchen operations. So it wasn't anything glamorous. I wasn't teaching people kung fu or anything. I would do that in college. I'd teach jiu-jitsu for a little while and lean into that. At church, I would serve on pastoral protection teams. And so I was still kind of doing some of that, of an old strength of being able to interact in the world of protection. But my wife and I sold a bunch of stuff, rented out a bunch of stuff, packed our bags, and then moved to Central America to be full-time Christian missionaries. That's where I would really learn how to teach, and I would go way deep in my study of theology, Christian philosophy, church history, apologetics, and all the ologies, ecclesiology, eschatology, soteriology, all the ologies. I just fell in love with theology. I just read all the time, and I did it for years, and it was real fruitful missions work. After 4 years on the mission field, we moved back to the United States, and I got a job doing some tactical training stuff. In that tactical training job, though, I found that this gun industry, which I didn't really even know was there until, all of a sudden I found myself in it. I saw a bit of a caricature of a man where it was more of this. I saw bravado. I saw this 1,000-yard stare, tough guy thing. And I'm like, is there room to have a family or just kind of be a dad while we're learning gun stuff? Or can we do that too? And nobody really seemed to bridge the gap of I was supposed to be this cartoonish killer protector guy. And I'm like, that. I get it plays really well in the movies, but I live in real life and I'm actually on a journey. I'd like to know how to be a better protector, but also, even more importantly, I'd like to be a good man. I'd like to be a good dad and a good husband and a force for good in the world. And so, whereas I didn't really find a place that I belonged, I started my own thing. And it was this concept of Warrior Poet Society.
Wow. So you just started out online? Did you start on YouTube? Did you start a website?
I started on YouTube.
Okay.
So I had a friend in the gun space, James Yeager, who brought me on some videos, and he really encouraged me to hey man, you could do this. And I'm like, do what? Make selfie videos on the internet of no, I need a real job. No offense, but but he encouraged me to do it. And what I found is the message and the ethos really resonated with a lot of people. It really helped a lot of people. And I realized I'm a guy that's really called to communicate for life change, meaning I give a crap. I actually want dudes to become stronger, more of who God intended them to be. And I think men should be masculine. I think we should be strong. I think we should be bold and courageous. I think we should be fearsome. I think we should be dangerous. And so all those things are true. And for a lot of men who didn't have anything that brought all the broken, distant pieces of themselves together, that's what Warrior Poet Society did. Though I will concede that really what I did is I ripped off biblical masculinity and rebranded it in something more palatable to the secular world. And then I harbinger in the gospel as I can.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's ripping anything off. I think that's just taking the truth and dispelling it and giving it to a world where you've got influence and knowledge that needs it.
Well, there you go.
Love seeing you do that.
Well, there's my confession.
Yep. I love it. It's a good one. Let's talk. So you discuss one of your recent episodes, you discuss 5 countercultural ways you live by. First one was visit online, but live offline. You talk about that?
That's right. Sure. For the 5 countercultural ways I live, I will say this I think every way that I live is pretty countercultural. And in fact, if you want to be a healthy human, man or woman, if you want to be healthy, listen to me, guys,
right.
Find out what the culture is doing and do the opposite. I think it's just that simple. Of like, whatever culture is saying is good, it's bad. Don't do that. Do the opposite. And of course, I'm tongue in cheek here. People are like, what about, yeah. It's a generalization, but the generalization is pretty darn true. One thing, as you had mentioned, that I do is I visit online, but I live offline. Too many people are just so sucked into our technology, and we go from our computer at work to our phones, to our TVs, back to our phones, and then we go to sleep, we wake up, and we do it all again. And if you're not tracking it, what can happen is before you know it, you're logging so much time online that you're not really present in the real world. You got relationships right under your nose and to your left and your right of those could have been deep friendships. Those could have been real relationships in your community and church. Your sons and daughters are starving for your attention, and you could mold them if you just invested in them. And all this social media time, I'm not a Luddite, I use social media, but the idea is I use social media and I use the internet. It doesn't use me. Of like, I've got it, it doesn't have me. And so many times we can kind of accidentally fall in to this kind of idolatry of tech, just like people do of idolatry of money or 100 other things that we do. And we just kind of accidentally fall into an addiction like this, and it ends up robbing our lives. You're scrolling your lives away. And you don't even realize it.
Yeah. Besides everything it exposes you to, I like to tell my kids this thing right here. It's like a chainsaw. A chainsaw is a really, really good tool. You can get a lot of good work done quickly with it. Chainsaw will also cut your leg off.
That's right.
Or your hand off. This right here, you can get a lot of good work done with this. You can connect with people. We're using it obviously to share a message, and I'm just using this to represent all of the technology, but it can cut your heart out and cut your soul out as well. It's much more dangerous than a chainsaw or any manner of, dangerous tool that we can think about. And so I love that, we need to put it in our box. It's a good tool to use in the right place.
That's right, man. Only freedom comes through discipline. And people don't like that. They think of the opposite of like no discipline equals freedom. I'm like, well, if you have no discipline, you'll have a really free and fun couple weeks. But then you'll be poor and you'll be forced to go, grind out multiple jobs to survive. Your relationships will all fall to pieces. Your health will disintegrate underneath you. I'm like, no, actually, the only way you can really live and stay free is through discipline. This is an Aristotle thing. This is ancient wisdom that we have really forgotten. And so it is a very, very good, healthy thing for men and women to put limitations around themselves and enforce different disciplines so that they can actually live well. There's so much through these screens that's causing rampant envy and anxiety. Everyone's afraid all the time, and you just never get any real mental rest. Boredom is never happening because you immediately pick up your phone whenever you don't even mean to. You just start scrolling. You didn't even mean to. Well, a lot of times boredom, when you achieve boredom, it means a couple things may be happening, but one is you're actually getting rest. That's a good thing. Boredom is a good signal. You're actually getting some rest. Good job. If you're never bored, it's because you're never really resting. I'll also say is in my space, I'm called on to have a certain amount of creative power. And when I'm burnt out or tired or anxious, creativity just doesn't come to me. And so it's really only when I achieve boredom that creativity comes, and then that ends up fueling good work. And I would get more good work from my rest and boredom than I would if I grind out twice as many hours at work that week. And so what we find out is it's not good for a person to work 7 days a week. You need rest. And that phone keeps your mind in a constant state of work feel. Even it's not work. It's not, you're just scrolling around. But your brain is never really disconnecting and resting. And so
processing, it is working.
That's right. And so it's been detrimental, terrible to our mental and spiritual health.
Yeah. Segue off of something you said a minute ago. You talked about lack of discipline. Lack of discipline ultimately in a culture invites tyranny, right? I mean, that if we're going to just do whatever we want, no discipline, no anything, we're going to break down. You got to have controls. My way of saying it to my kids is, if you want freedom, you got to be responsible.
That's good.
Which is being responsible is discipline. But we invite an overbearing authority if we're going to be a people that don't have discipline.
That's good, because it makes a vacuum that tyrants see and step into.
Yes,
that's right.
Exactly. Okay, let's go on to another point here, because this is important. Love your spouse more than your kids. This is my note number 2 on your 5 countercultural ways. Talk about that.
Yeah, if you would like to raise healthy kids, the worst thing that you could, not the worst thing, but one of the worst things you could do is make them feel like they're the center of the universe. The healthy thing for your kids is to let them see what a healthy marriage looks like, and let them see that your spouse is the most important person in the home to you. You love your spouse and you do that. And so what it does is it models good marriage. It keeps the marriage extremely healthy, and the kids don't grow up to be little brats that think the world revolves around them. And so that's what you do when you're constantly addressing the kid all the time, making them the center of the world. You make little narcissists, little Napoleons, little kings and queens that think that the universe revolves around them, because the house does revolve around them. Yeah. So you got to have them, hey, go disappear, go have fun, go play. Oh, you're bored. That means you want chores. I'll give you chores. And then there is, and so all of a sudden, I'm like, nope, we'll do it. And then that allows them to have their own creative space where they've got to invent, and they got to go explore the woods, and they got to create stuff. And so that'll spur on their creative powers rather than you being their entertainer. They also need copious amounts of work. They need jobs and responsibilities, so that you teach them and train them from a young age to be productive and responsible members of society. Not to just all time is playtime. I'm like, that is how to ruin your kid. And the problem is a lot of parents that would like to do well, and they actually love their kids a lot. And that's why they want to give them everything. They want to answer every question, and they want to step in to solve every problem. And I'm like, what you're doing is you're smothering them. Yeah. And they're not going to be able to grow in that context. So do not make them the center of the universe. Love your spouse more than your kids, and your kids have got a shot.
So a couple tangible ways. Just what are a couple things you and your wife do to stay connected, for you to show her that? Just like tangible, do you guys have some patterns? I'm thinking of a couple Carolyn and I have. You have a couple of patterns that you can share with people. Do you guys take specific time? Do you do a few specific things that help? Because it's tough in this world with all the competition, for our time, and the husband, the wife. And I've found we've got to be disciplined and I have to be in leading in that and doing things that make sure that I exemplify exactly what you're talking about towards my wife. Do you have some things that you do particularly that you'd like to share?
Absolutely. Well, we need to take control of our lives. And the good thing about our homes and our families is you can run that any way that you think is best. Doesn't matter what everyone else is doing outside your walls. This is what we're going to do. Some tangible stuff of my boys. They are 11 and 12 right now. And for years and years, we make sure there's a certain time where they go to bed. That changes. But maybe they'll go to bed at 8:30 or 9. Now, once they get up to their room, they may read for an hour, and then they talk for 30 minutes, and then it's lights out and they put themselves down. But we say goodbye to them at 8:30 or 9, and you are not to come down unless you are, bleeding out. This is mommy daddy time. Today over breakfast, before work, my wife said, hey, I couldn't find a babysitter tonight for a date night. We were trying to do a date night tonight, but couldn't get a sitter. So it's like, what if we sent the kids up at 8 o'clock and we had a date night at home? And I'm like, yeah, that'll work. We'll do that. We'll make it special. We'll do something for that. And so that's an example of us making a hard line between kid time, family time, and husband-wife time. And so me and my wife are spending time with each other, quality time with each other. And we got family stuff. Also, sometimes just throughout the day or maybe at dinner, the kids are just being too chatty. They are dominating every moment of our time and thought. And, that's kids. And a lot of times that's great. That's fine. I want to hear from them. I want to talk with them. I want to interact with them. But other times it's just, whoa, I'm getting stressed here. Hey, kids, quiet time. Do not speak again. I haven't even looked at your mother in 15 minutes during this meal. Baby, tell me about your day. And now we just put them in complete timeout, not because they were in trouble. We're not yelling at the kids. I'm like, kids, I would love to hear from your mother. Let's have you kids lock it up. Y'all just focus on eating, and I'm going to talk to your mother. Baby, how you doing today? And so we just make that hard limit. And so another thing is kids are not allowed to interrupt us when we're speaking. I see this all the time. It's a default setting with marriages, and I think it's not a good, healthy thing. But mom and dad are talking, or mom's talking to somebody else, or I'm talking to someone else, and the kids come up, mommy, 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 mommy. And they do that until mom stops what she's doing. She turns and she addresses the kid. Now, if the kid's bleeding out, then yeah, obviously, if like, hey, Timmy's choking to death, I'm like, yeah, interrupt in that point. But 99.9% of the time, this is not a life-threatening thing. The kid just thinks what they have to say and do or ask, I want a popsicle. They think that is worth interrupting because they don't value the fact that you two are having a conversation. So that would be a hard red flag limit for a kid. I'm like, no, I'm speaking. And now you're just going to have to wait. Or if like, hey, whatever you were going to ask me for, the answer is no because you interrupted me. Doesn't matter what it was. The answer is no because of that. Now, you may want to stop and hear them out. And then you say, well, the answer is no. I might have, but the answer is no because you interrupted your father while he was speaking. I'd like you to apologize to your father now for that. And the next time, don't interrupt. We see you. We know that you would like to speak. But so what that does is it gives an order, and it keeps them from growing up as being little narcissists, and it teaches them to honor their father and mother. And it also shows that mom and dad are a team, and we won't see the other one disrespected in any way. And so this is stuff that we used to struggle with. This is not a issue in our house. Our kids aren't interrupting us and haven't done that for years. So that's not even an issue. But it used to be when, they're 5 and 6, and we got to train them how to actually interact with parents, and the kids will get away with whatever you let them get away with.
Yeah. Well, and that's just good child training to prepare them for society.
Right.
And, interacting with other people, and in this day and age, going out and getting a job, they know how to behave like that. They're going to rise above. They're going to stand above because so many people don't.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay, I want to get through all 5 here. Never alone with a member of the opposite sex who isn't your spouse.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Culture will hate that. They'll shriek at that, and I don't really care because I'm just going to do whatever I want. And the fact of the matter is, like, dudes have guy friends. Guys and girls are different. We just are. And I don't think that a healthy man in a healthy marriage has anything to gain from a, friendship with a female of the opposite sex, so that we need to go out and get dinner together, or let's go coffee together, or something like that. Now, some people in the workplace, I'm like, well, this is Janine. She works in the cubicle over, and we have to go meet in the conference room to talk about X, Y, Z. I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's not a hard, fast kind of. It's not a hard, fast thing. It's just a general principle, and the principle is this: of I'm not going to give any women, and my wife's not giving any men, individual private access to them. That's not something we even really sat down for. It was just kind of a mutual respect thing of like, I've got plenty of friends that are females, and I'll interact with them, and I love them. They're great gals, and we're doing life with them. But our friendship is in a group. It's never, let's go get coffee, you and I. It opens up a doorway that is just not constructive. You don't need that. You shouldn't need that. And what may happen with a member of the opposite sex as well is you all of a sudden accidentally invite them to fulfill some emotional or physical intimacy that you're not getting within your marriage. And it happens slow. It's a slow fade, but that's how marriages are destroyed. It's better just to not open the door at all. And other people have like, I don't agree with that. And I'd be like, oh, well, great. Then you do whatever you want. But this is the whole subject here is 5 countercultural ways that I live. And so I live like this, and you do whatever you want, listener. This is how I do it. So, yeah.
Well, so far, these are all principles that we live by. And, you're just looking for trouble if you're going to break that, for those people that think, oh, that's no big deal. And it has become very normal in our culture, even sometimes within Christian circles. And you're playing with the appearance of evil, and you're certainly opening the door for the possibility of all kinds of things by going down that road. So yeah. I'm glad to see that on your list.
Yeah, what you would gain from having a friend of the opposite sex is not worth what you risk in doing that. And when I say friend of the opposite, I've got tons of friends of the opposite sex. What I'm talking about is we're not going to get coffee together, just her and I, and chatting it up for an hour or two and talking about life. Of like, no, my girl friends are not the same as my guy friends. Not the same.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we got 2 more to cover here in a few minutes, and they're both biggies. Don't let other people raise your kids.
Yes, absolutely.
So how you guys do it? You guys just straight up homeschool? And what's your, tell me about that.
So people will be real upset about this, but I care. And that's why I'll say I'm not getting sponsored for homeschool. Homeschool is not paying me, to be able to be a proselyte. I'm a true believer. And it's this. If you send your kids off to the government schools, that's what they are. Public schools are government schools, technically. You're signing up. Yeah, you're signing up.
Schools with a purpose.
That's right. You're signing up for government curriculum with government workers. And even if some of those teachers that they're sweeties, they're great, and you know them and whatever, it's still a government curriculum. And it's not just it's also how it's set up of like, if you've got boys, government schools will destroy the love of learning in your boys particularly. It'll just stifle it out. No government school kids love reading like our kids. When our kids go to bed, even at 12, but this has been true for 5-6 years, they have one question. Mommy, Daddy, how much reading time do we have tonight? And if we say, we'll give you an hour, they'll go, oh, thank you. Because reading, it's like this, that's the cherry on top of like, they can't wait to read. My 11-year-old has read more books than he is high. If you stacked them all up of like, we just had them tested for the first time, and they're kind of normal average in math, but on the reading, literature comprehension, they tested ready for college. And I'm like, all right, well that's going well. We've raised readers. They love reading. Government schools, you're not going to ever have that legacy. They're destroying the love of learning and the love of reading out of your kids. It stifles the imagination of your kids. Most kids in government schools are also being medicated as well to handle behavioral issues that, this is not... I'm opening a big can of worms, and there's lots of people that may immediately cry out, yeah, but I have such... Well, each instance could be addressed separately, but the general principle is this. If you send your kids off to Caesar, don't be surprised when they come back Romans. You're sending your kids to the government, and they're spending, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours away from you every day with their peers who are all plugged in to who knows what they're watching and who knows what kind of households they come from. And then you have all this this really gross and perverted curriculums that's coming on. You got critical race theory, you got gender theory, you got all this stuff that's bombarding your kids with woke professors. And you sit around the dinner table and you talk about what we actually believe, and then maybe you do Sunday school, and maybe you drive them to and fro to sports. But here, it amounts to this. You're just not able to log enough time to counteract the poison that they're getting every moment throughout the day, every day. It's just not enough. And people can rail against me and say, that's not true. And all I can say is, well, we'll see in 15 years. We'll see in 10 years when your kid goes off to college and utterly rejects your values. And you say, I didn't raise you like this. And the real fact of the matter is, perhaps you'll even remember this podcast. And here's me saying, you didn't raise him that way. You barely raised him at all. The government raised your kids. You sent them off for the majority of the day, every day, to a government to educate. Yeah. And that hurts to hear. But that's what's happening.
It's already happening. I mean, the truth and even the statistics are there. And it's been a while since I've looked at them, but even, our oldest is 19. And when we were deep into researching and looking at these things, when you looked at the failure rate of Sunday school and public education, how many kids go into college from a Christian home claiming Christ and leave college way off somewhere else. I mean, it's already happening, and the statistics are there to show that.
Right.
I think we just got to have the fortitude and the bravery to stand up and go countercultural and raise our kids if we want them to grow up in the faith and in the path that we're trying to send them on. Then we got to get more time in, and we got to take more responsibility for it.
That's it. The fact of the matter is really if mom is using all the stuff she needs to be an adult, successful woman, and dad is using all the stuff he needs to be an adult male functioning in society. And if your kids could just be around you enough, all that would catch. Yeah. The teenage years for my kids is quite easy. We'll have them reading certain books. There'll be certain scholastic goals and programs they're going through, but most of their high school is just following me around, working all the different sectors of my company, learning how to do everything. It's an apprenticeship, like has always happened for all human history. To bring boys into manhood, it always went through an apprenticeship, a rite of passage where they learned actual skills and they got real world education. This is how we handle conflict. This is how we do taxes. This is how we interact with people. This is how we lead. This is how insurance works. This is how sales work. All right, see, buddy, you saw me in that. You saw me in that. All right, this is what's called sales, and this is how and so you're explaining the world as we go through. But most of those topics that I just talked about, of like all the stuff that you're using, of like taxes and insurance and sales and rhetoric and logic and conflict, none of it is taught in school. I'm like, how is this not even taught? And so it ends up being that even in the government schools and the universities, the stuff that you really need as a man isn't really even being taught.
Isn't that interesting? We'll not go too far down that trail, but isn't that interesting that those things aren't being taught? And they teach you how to have a career, maybe, but they don't teach you anything about managing money. You can get all the way through college and never have taken any kind of basic financial.
And if you get all the way through college, you're probably wildly in debt to the government. And that debt doesn't even go away if you declare bankruptcy.
Nope.
I'm like, no, if you owe the government, you owe them until you die, and then they'll get it out of your kids. It never goes away. Whereas other debt, you declare bankruptcy, it goes away. And the interest on that, a lot of people graduate, rack up huge student loans, never get a return on that degree like they were promised they would. And instead, they're paying that juice down for 15 years. Yep. If instead you put what you put into college into just some index fund, mutual fund, and instead of paying on that note over and over, you were just paying it in interest, you'll retire a multimillionaire because of math. And so, they're not taught financial literacy. Part of the entire endeavor of the racket that is the university system is a test to ensure that you don't have financial competency because you did it in the first place. Now, that's not true for a lot of the technical stuff. So if you want to be an engineer, get an engineering degree, you'll probably get a good ROI on that, and you got to do it. You want to be a doctor? I would like my doctor to have gone to medical school. I want him to go to school, and he'll get an ROI on that. But you're not going to get an ROI off art history major. It's good stuff to know art history. Learn it on your own time. That's a good hobby, and you can study that for 30 years while you do your normal job. But don't get a degree in it. You're You're going to spend 80 grand, never get a return on that, and you'll be paying that down for a decade. You're torpedoing your financial future. And we don't even teach kids enough about money. Of like Einstein would say, one of the most powerful forces in the world is compounding interest. I paraphrase, but Einstein, compounding interest. That means, so anyway, what is being taught is bad, and the stuff that they should be taught instead isn't being taught. So we just brought it all in-house. There's no way we will do as bad as the federal government is at education. And I think all parents should do the same, no matter how much it hurts. Right. That's awful. Like, maybe that's not realistic right now. Make a plan so that it is. Figure it out. My wife and I, to be able to do this, because we were not making good money at the time when we made the decision to homeschool. Mm-hmm. And all of our friends, they were a little further along. I'd had detours in military and mission field, and I spent really my life savings on the mission field, funding our own mission. And so we quickly plunged into debt. I couldn't make ends meet. And whereas all of our friends, keeping up with the Joneses, are living in big houses, we moved out of a house and moved into a little apartment stacked in on a bunch of other people. That just seemed, nobody could really understand that. But it's because we wanted to be a single income home and homeschool our kids, and it's the only way we could financially do it. And so it took great sacrifice. I drove a 1993 pickup truck. So a way old truck, hundreds of thousands of miles on it. We just really tightened down and did what we had to because we valued our kids more than stuff. And that hurt. I didn't say it wouldn't be without tremendous sacrifice, but at the end, I think we'll get to keep our kids. And so anyway.
There's so much there. We could follow this trail for a while. I think I want to conclude the thought just with that all of these things take sacrifice. You don't get to the top of that mountain, right, with that amazing view and 360 just gorgeous seeing all that God's created and done without hiking up the mountain, without carrying that load, sacrificing to get the benefit. And anything that's worth the benefit, that's worth it, is going to have a struggle. It's going to have a sacrifice. And I think that's, I think all of us on this road, and those of you out there thinking of getting on this road, it's just, we've got to give some things up if we want to get the better things.
That's right. That's good.
And get to the better place. One more here I want to cover before we wrap up. I know we're getting on close to an hour. Get unplugged from the matrix. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know how controversial the other 4 that I said will be to your community, but homesteading family, all you guys are kind of, we can all rally around that one. Let's do homesteading stuff. And so that's right. You guys, those listening in, you're already living in an extremely countercultural way, which for most of human history was the only way of surviving, period. Homestead was the bedrock of all society. It was the family. Homesteading, that's how everyone lived forever until Industrial Revolution generally. Mm-hmm. And now we've forgotten even just basic skills of, hey, how do we feed ourselves? Where does our food come from? Of like all those skills, my wife and I, we didn't have any of that until just a few years ago when we started cultivating that. And we started leaning into some of these subject matter experts of the Salatins and Rhodes and the Dorderies, who are friends of ours. We love them. Mm-hmm. And so we've been learning and on a journey and growing food and having chickens and cows and off-grid and all that stuff. So it's been quite a journey.
Well, and it's a good life. You talking about kids not being bored and man, what a place for kids to learn about life, to grow up strong, to learn how to work, to learn how to think, problem solve, besides getting off the matrix and getting off the centralized systems, which you guys are all going to fail at some point. We've seen a little bit of that, and more is coming eventually. I'm not an alarmist, but it's just the reality of the world that we're in. These large megalithic systems, this matrix. I like to talk getting off the grid isn't just about getting off electricity. It's about getting off the food grid, the medical grid, the education grid, all of those things, because they're either failing us or they're going to fail us in the future.
Wow.
But yeah, what a great way to raise our kids as well in that environment.
Man, how do you get off the medical grid? That's, I guess, be healthier so you don't need it. Have friends that are doctors down the road.
Yeah.
But it's just, you just uncovered a whole other area of like, man, I've got some medical training, got some stuff, but to be off the medical grid, I mean, like my kids are at an orthodontics appointment right now, and I'd rather not do a YouTube video and figure out how to do it yourself braces.
Well, I think like the rest of this conversation, John, we're talking some generalities, and there's always specifics, right? I'm very thankful for a medical system that is so precise, that can fix things so well, but it does have some deficiencies when it comes to disease and solving our problems. We have a food system that makes us more reliant on a medical system. And so you said it, get healthy, know where your food's coming from, raise it yourself or buy it from somebody that you know how it's that right there lessens your dependence on the medical grid. And
that's huge. That's I like how you put it. It's interesting to me because I'm like, ooh, how else can I lean in to what Josh was saying of like, oh, medical independence right there. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. So anyway, I'll be stewing on that.
Good. Learn herbs, right? Get an herbal garden and learn how to treat some of the basics. Learn how to do even some first aid. I mean, first aid's got some mechanics, but it also needs some medicine. A lot of that stuff you can handle. You can grow it yourself, and you can handle it naturally. Now, like anything, you need to know when to rely on this knowledge and when to go see the orthodontist or the surgeon or whatever, of course. But anyways, John, I know we're at the hour. We could carry on a long time. This was good stuff, and I'm thankful for you to share your perspective. And I there's always going to be people out there that are challenged, and that's part of our job, is to challenge a little bit. But in all of your 5 topics, I think you resonate with our audience a lot, and so I'm happy that they've gotten to know you a little bit, and I want them to come check you out, get familiar with you. We didn't even get to talking a little bit deeper about all that you do over at Warrior Poet Society. So where can people go to find you and get hooked up with what you're doing?
If people would check us out at WarriorPoetSociety.com, that's WarriorPoetSociety.com. That'll show from our website, you can find out all the other stuff we're doing. We do in-person training. We have a streaming service that has all of our rifle and pistol classes on it. And then we've got all kinds of protector and preparation kind of gear and security stuff and apparel and stuff on our website. And so then I've got my book there and our video stuff on YouTube and our social media. All that stuff comes from the hub of WarriorPoetSociety.com.
Cool. Before we go, your book, because I wanted to mention that, remind me the title. I've read it. It's been a few months. Remind me the title. And for the dads out there, you go, oh, good, you got it close.
Oh, yeah. It was kind of a reach.
All right, you can grab it. We're easy going here. We don't have to be.
So the Warrior Poet Way.
Yeah.
Is the name
of it.
Good
book, man. Good book. Wives, good Father's Day present.
Thank you.
Good book to encourage that warrior and that poet that John was talking about. So, John, thanks for hanging out with me today. It's been great talking to you, getting to know you a little bit. And thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us this week. We will see you next time. Adios.